Hello. In Chapter 14, the role of the instructional designer at work, we start to look at what work or tasks the instructional designer is going to do in a variety of different situations. While this is one of the last chapters in the text, I often have it as one of the first chapters we read to kind of give an overview of what the role is, what this job does, and just the various tasks that someone has to perform in order to be an effective instructional designer. First of all, one of the things an instructional designer has to recognize is whether or not to follow the instructional design model. Now, the model that we're using in class, the Morrison and Ross and Kemp model, outlines it's a circle. It kind of goes in a clockwise fashion. You kind of do this and you do this, and then you have revision and project management kind of surrounding it. If you look at some other models like the ADDIE model, ADDIE, you start with an analysis, then you do the design, then you develop, then you implement, and you evaluate, and it's more linear. What you have to figure out, though, is that every situation is going to be different, and in not all situations are you going to be able to follow the model as prescribed. So you need to look at some things. For one of the things is the time frame. If you're getting approached to do a job, how much time do you have to get ready? And also, how much time is the learners going to have to do this? How much information do they need? So if it's going to be a very quick one-shot deal, you might not do all the revisions and the testing, and it might not be such a thorough analysis if you know the audience and you know what needs to get done. This often happens in jobs where you're an instructional designer in an organization and you've designed instruction over and over again. You kind of can skip some steps because you already know who the learners are or what they're doing. Also, the nature of the delivery. Is this going to be a facilitated class? Is it going to be web-based? Is it going to be, job aids? What aspects do you have to do? Because depending on what you're asked to do, some steps may or may fall out. And then the big one is resources. Time, people, and money. How many people do you have to get it done? How long do you have to get it done? And how much money do you have to do it? All of that is going to impact how much you do in terms of the elements on the model. Again, the model is a guide. And if you have the time, resources, and money to do it, it's a really good process to make sure you do a thorough learner analysis, a thorough task analysis, look at how it works in the system, and then go step by step and do formative and summative evaluations and confirmative, and then double check for revisions. Sometimes that's just not possible, and what you learn is it's more of an art. You have to figure out what you can cut back on and what you need to concentrate on. So the model is a model. It's not meant to be carved in stone. You use the aspects that you need to get the job done for the client. Now, in working on instructional design projects, there's various roles. You're the instructional designer. This is typically going to be the person who guides the process, works up the instructional design plan, determines what instructional strategies will be used. The project management part of the instructional design process. Another incredibly critical person is the subject matter expert, or you hear them called SMEs. And this is the person who knows what the system is, or knows the task, and knows how to do it accurately. What you'll find as an instructional designer, you don't need to know how to do the task in order to design the instruction. You work with the subject matter experts who walks you through the steps and you take notes, or tells you the content that needs to be covered. So most of the actual content comes from subject matter experts. Although sometimes the instructional designer might actually be the SME, but usually in an instructional design project, you have experts that you rely on for the information. The third person involved is the client. And this is the person who owns the problem, usually the one that's hired you, or the manager, the supervisor that sees that there's a situation. They're the one that has the skin in the game. They want this problem solved. Now, some other people you may work with, performance consultants. These individuals usually guide solutions that are not instructionally founded. So when you do your initial analysis to figure out what the problem is, if it's an organization communication problem, or if there's a problem in the system that's not training related, often you would call in a performance consultant and they would handle it. Sometimes the instructional designer can also serve as a performance consultant because they can help point out where situations and issues are, but there is a whole group called performance consultants. And the final group, these are your graphic artists, your programmers, your web page developers, your media makers, audio people. These are all the different support roles which complete certain tasks in the instructional design process. For instance, if you need a video about how this electronic board is put together, you would probably subcontract out or work with a videographer to do that and capture that and get it on the web. So those are just a variety of other roles in the process. Typically, instructional designers do not work in isolation, but they're part of a team. And here are just some major definitions that I'll probably be throwing out that you need to know. Milestones is just the completion of major tasks along the instructional design plan. Just like you have mile markers on the highway to tell you how far you're going or how far along the road you are, you have milestones. It might be when the task analysis is complete or when the first draft of the instructional materials are done. Those are major milestones that usually have dates associated with them, so you can tell whether or not you're on track for completion. A deliverable is a tangible item that's provided to the client. This could be a report, it could be a draft of the instructional materials, it could be the design document. It's anything that is tangible, meaning that they can see it, touch it, read it, that type of thing. So you'll have several deliverables in this course that you'll have to do. And so again, it's just a tangible item that's complete. And then you have two different types of task. You have a fixed duration task and a resource-driven or variable duration task. And when you start making your schedules or planning out your milestones to manage the project, you need to determine what type of task it is. A fixed duration task or task that's going to take a specific set amount of time no matter what happens. The example that's given in the book is really good. If you need to watch a 30-minute video, you watch a 30-minute video. You can't watch a 30-minute video in 20 minutes. It shouldn't take you an hour. 30 minutes is 30 minutes. So tasks that have fixed durations. This is going to be accomplished in this amount of time. This is how much time you need, no matter how many people you have sitting around the table. If 5 of you are watching the video, it still takes 30 minutes. Unlike a resource-driven task or a variable duration task where the time to complete depends on the amount of resources assigned to it. An example is, writing test items or doing focus groups or learner interviews. If you have one person doing it, it could take, a week to schedule and facilitate 7 different focus groups. However, if you had a team of people, you might be able to schedule them all for one day and get them all done in an 8-hour period as opposed to a 40-hour period. So depending if the task can be done quicker with more people, it's resource driven or variable duration. If the task is going to take the same amount of time no matter how many people or resources assigned to it, it's fixed duration. So those are some important definitions that we need to keep track of while we're working. And the final thing that I want to touch on that the book brought up are legal liabilities. Sometimes people think, well, you're training and that's not that important, or you're not the one ultimately responsible. But instructional designers can be held liable and legally responsible for the training that they provide. This is important to understand. Some common problems that you have: failure to perform training. This is more on the organization, but if it's a required training like sexual harassment or OSHA violations or safety training, different things like that, and you don't perform that training, then you're liable. And if you're the head of the training department and you didn't schedule that, that could be on you. Emotional or physical trauma. If somebody, because of the examples that you're using in training or the activities that you have scheduled in your training, somebody gets hurt, either emotionally or physical, they could probably sue for damages. So those are the things that you need to watch. Are the activities that you're doing relevant to what needs to happen? Here's a big one: intellectual property infringement. And we probably do this more than we realize, and we really shouldn't. But a lot of training, you come across a cartoon or a picture or an image, and it's really good, and you're like, oh, I'm just going to use this and put it in my training. Well, you really can't do that with copyright liabilities. And so if you put an image or a cartoon in your training and you made thousands of copies that you're sending out across the country or worldwide even, and then the owner of that image finds out, you could be in serious legal trouble. So you need to pay attention to intellectual property and copyright laws to make sure you can actually use the materials that you find. Here's some content is discriminatory. Hopefully in this day and age, people are a little bit more aware of the different examples that they use, the images that they use. You want to make sure that you're inclusive and that you're not going to offend or discriminate against anyone. Access to training. Everybody should have equal access. This comes into the fact that if you design training and you have a blind person who's visually impaired, or you have someone who has mobility issues, you have to be able to design that training to meet their needs. And if you haven't, you could be liable for not doing that. And another example is testing and evaluation. The tests and evaluations that you give to determine whether or not people have passed training or have succeeded or achieved needs to be fair. So those are just some of the things that you need to think about. And hopefully when you read chapter 14, it goes into a lot more detail than we gone to in this lecture. You start to get a picture of what this job actually looks like. Anyway, I look forward to talking with you next week, and I will see you then.